Speed limits across Amsterdam are changing, and 30 is the new 50. What does it mean for drivers and pedestrians alike? Let's jump into it and find out. Amsterdam is a city that predates the car. Trams, bicycles, pedestrians have all existed here way before the car, and many of the city roads were never designed for the car. Cars were kind of put in as an afterthought, and the reality is, with having little space to work with and cars increasingly growing in size and the number of cars increasingly growing, it's not realistic or practical to continue to have things and speeds designed the way they were before. And frankly, as a driver, there are many parts of the city where it's plain uncomfortable to drive 50 kilometers per hour. I mean, you have so many things going on, bicycles, pedestrians, trams, and so many things to look out for. You can't even drive 50 kilometers per hour sometimes. There are many parts of the city where I totally support this change, both as a driver and as a pedestrian living in the city. And I want to show a few examples of this in this video today. So here's an example of a road that is going to become 30 kilometers per hour. And as you've seen before leading up to this, there's a lot going on. Pedestrians, trams, bicycles, cars parked on the side of the road, narrow lanes. It totally makes sense for this road to change to 30 kilometers per hour. And you can see there's already devices that force drivers to slow down. This I totally get and totally support. One of the things I think about more and more are how cars are just growing exponentially. Everybody wants SUVs, and that trend is also happening here in the Netherlands and Amsterdam and across Europe in general. Cars are getting a lot bigger, and having roads and speed limits designed for cars that were designed back in the 60s and 70s simply doesn't make sense anymore. And it's really good to see that the city of Amsterdam is kind of evolving in their design and thinking around this and catering to that. You see, vehicle tires also make a lot of noise at speeds above 30 kilometers per hour. So on roads where there's a lot of traffic and a lot of residences around, even if it's not for the sake of space or, trams, pedestrians, cyclists, there's also a noise factor that's being considered as part of this change as well. So there are some roads that will continue to remain 50 kilometers per hour for cars. And those are mainly the car-centric S roads, like you see the one here, but many roads are changing to 30 kilometers per hour. So this is a good example of a road which I'm glad is turning into 30 kilometers per hour, both as a driver and as a pedestrian. Now the tram line does run on top of this road, but this is one where there's a lot of things going on with not a lot of space. You have bikes, pedestrians, trams all over with the cars, and when this is 50 kilometers an hour, both as a driver, it's a lot to pay attention to. I never do 50 kilometers per hour on this road. And as a pedestrian, it's quite intimidating when cars are flying by at 50 kilometers per hour with such tight proximity. So this is a road that I actually said I can't wait until it becomes 30 kilometers per hour for drivers, and this is a good example of why. You can see there's a lot going on here and a lot to pay attention to as a driver and as a pedestrian, and this is a good example of a road that should be 30 kilometers per hour. I'm surprised that it was 50. Here's an example of a road which I believe is going to maintain 50 kilometers per hour. One of the maybe newer roads of the city, and it's very wide. The bicycle path is clearly separated from the road. The road itself is quite wide with parking spaces along the side up ahead here. So you can see much wider here with parking, clearly separated bicycle path and pedestrian path, plenty of space. So this one can be 50 kilometers per hour comfortably. Part of the important thing about changing speed limits is changing the road design to actually force drivers to drive 30 kilometers per hour. Here's one example of a road that was recently redone, that they redid the road to accommodate a 30 kilometer per hour speed limit, meaning they widened the island, narrowed the lanes, and added some curves and chicanes to force drivers to slow down. So this actually makes sense because then you physically cannot drive fast. Even the maximum you could probably do here is 50 kilometers per hour. I'll show another example of this, but this is something that's really important in Dutch road design, is actually designing the road for the speed you want drivers to drive. And this is not something that really is done in North America, but there is some more awareness around it following the Dutch design of forcing drivers to slow down, which is really helpful. As more roads become 30 kilometers per hour, this sort of implementation of forcing drivers to slow down will be more important. Another design trick with this road, which is also 30 kilometers per hour, is you see the wider island and narrower lanes are these speed humps, which you cannot really drive faster than 30 or 40 over because you will go up and down and it will damage your car. So this is another way to force drivers to slow down, is kind of adding these speed humps. They're not so much bumps, but they're more gradual, but you still have to slow down for them and make sure you're going 30 kilometers per hour. So it's currently November as I'm recording this, and you've seen many of the warning signs have gone up to advise drivers that the speed limit is changing on many roads as of December 8th. Next month in December, when this goes into effect, they're actually going to be removing that label over these signs, and the 30 kilometer per hour speed limit sign will be there. We will see how drivers take to the new speed limits after December 8th. I'm really curious to see because many roads are still designed for a higher speed limit. The city says many roads will be redesigned later on when they're time to be renewed. But for now, after December 8th, we'll have to see if drivers actually abide by the 30 kilometer per hour speed limits that will be enforced on these streets. So I actually have mixed feelings about this. As I've said, as a resident, I'm looking forward to the change and actually support it on many streets that I live around. As a driver, it's less exciting, but I understand the risks and the safety benefits and the noise benefits as well for residents. So mixed feelings, like I said, but I'm curious to get your thoughts about it. Leave a comment below and let me know what you think. Are there other initiatives in other cities around the world doing kind of this same type of thing of reducing speeds for cars? Let me know in the comments below, and until the next time, thanks so much for watching.